This is Beyond the Big Screen podcast with your host, Steve Guerra. Thank you for listening to Beyond the Big Screen podcast, where we talk about great movies and stories so great they should be movies. Links to learn more about our guest today can be found in the show notes. You can support Beyond the Big Screen on Patreon.com. By joining on Patreon, you help keep Beyond the Big Screen sustainable and get many great benefits. Go to patreon.com/Beyond the Big Screen to learn more and sign up. Find show notes, links to subscribe, and leave Apple Podcast reviews by going to our website, beyondthebigscreen.com. And now, let's go beyond the big screen.
Welcome back. Today, I am very excited to be joined by special guest, and we have kind of a different episode today. This is the first time we are diving into the small screen series. We are going to talk about the Netflix series From Scratch, starring Zoe Saldana, and we are joined by Theodora Voss, host of two great podcasts, Single and Divorced and the Miseducation of Masculinity podcasts. Theodora is going to take us through at least the first episode of this series and maybe even go in a little deeper into the series. Now, Theodora, before we get started, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your podcasts?
Yeah, thank you so much, first of all, for having me tonight. This is going to be awesome. Yeah. So I am an entrepreneur who actually uses her day job to finance her business as a breakup strategist. And so I basically take women through stages of their breakup, their makeup, and their move on journey. And my goal is to help them through a breakup with their partner or make up with themselves and heal. And then I also help them when they're ready to date again.
Oh, so that's going to be this show is really perfectly designed for that.
Yeah.
Just before we even delve too deeply, the series is, what's the series in the really broad strokes?
Yeah, so I feel like from my perspective, if I was to summarize it, that this show is about self-acceptance. It's about finding love. It's about breaking barriers. There's like cultural things. So essentially, Zoe Saldana, she, moves to, or her character in the show is Amy. So we're going to refer to her as Amy from now on. But her character leaves off on a journey from home. She kind of takes a risk by doing a different path or career than what she was expected to do. And then the show kind of kicks off from there.
I like how the show really does start off that she has these two completely divergent paths. She can take the artsy road, or she can go to Georgetown Law, the more conservative and the thing you really should do path. Well, what did you think about that?
I really liked that challenge because in the Black community, it is, doctor, lawyer, teacher. Those are some of the common things. And I think a lot of underrepresented minorities, face that too, where their parents are like, hey, we want you to take this path. Like maybe it's engineering, it's a doctor, it's a lawyer, it's something like that. And so to see that theme come up and see it talked about, I think that was really impactful for people who might be going through that or who have gone through that, and to have their experience acknowledged, right?
Yeah, we will get back to that, but through discussing the characters, and I wonder if we can start off with just the character of Amy.
Yeah. Amy is a very dynamic character. She knows what she wants, but she fights it a lot. And she starts to really have to do some self-acceptance throughout the show. And what's interesting about Amy is that she has, this great love of her life, right? But she couldn't really accept it until she accepted her own path. So I found that to be a very interesting theme that came up around, kind of who Amy is. And she's a fighter. That's something that emerged through her love story. Was the ability to be a fighter.
It's as soon as she hits the town in Tuscany and Florence, she meets two really dramatically different suitors.
Yes.
Maybe we can talk about the dichotomy between those. The one suitor, Giancarlo, he kind of fades. Well, maybe he fades away later in the series, but at least in the first episode, he doesn't seem to have won out. But maybe we can talk about this dichotomy that gets set up.
Yeah, it's interesting because, Giancarlo, he seems like the guy her dad would have like maybe pictured her with, right? And then Lino is like the great love of her life, like the passion, the flames, the fire, right? And so it's just interesting that those two, again, two keeps coming up, two pathways, two men, two different, directions that she could go when it comes to her path in life. Yeah.
It's interesting too that Amy, she's in that place in like where I don't know, I'm older, obviously. I mean, people on YouTube are seeing that. You kind of lose yourself that you can be that person when you're 22 years old, that you go to Italy. You've got all these options available. She really has the world on a platter, but at least this is my gather. I don't think she maybe realized that. What do you think?
I don't think she realized that either, because she was so like, she was holding on very tightly at first to this other path. And I think once she kind of, let go of that, she was able to see that she had options, but she was just holding on to it as though it was kind of like make or break or do or die when, she really did have so many options.
Lino, by the end of the first episode, he becomes the primary
Yeah.
love interest of Amy. Maybe describe his character.
Lino is so sure, like so sure. He does not doubt himself. He does not doubt what he wants. And he is so sure of himself in that country though. Once they end up in the US and his doubt kind of takes off. So he's very strong because of his roots and his heritage. And when he's in his country, in his homeland, right?
That's interesting. I think that'll lead us, and we'll circle back around to that.
Yeah.
Amy's dad, I think at being a man with the daughter, and you can see like every person kind of takes their journey from Lino to Herschel in a way. And he's played by the great David Keith, or Keith David. There's not to confuse him with David Keith, another great actor, but Keith David plays this role spectacularly.
Mm-hmm. He really does. He is, yeah, the daughter dad, right?
Yeah.
And I really enjoyed his character development a lot. I think he actually, he came the furthest. However, I think that we don't see him yet, but Lino's dad is actually another character that really has a strong development. So the two fathers, I feel like, have the biggest character development, the biggest shift in perspective and in just the way that they process and the way that they handle things. So it was interesting to see his eyes kind of get opened up over time.
Can you maybe explore that a little bit? I think I related with Herschel in a lot of ways, just from seeing life in different perspectives. And you can see how somebody like Herschel, he's worked hard to get his position. And how do you think that he feels in his relationship with his daughter? Do you think, I mean, obviously as a dad, he has something to say that he doesn't want her to just go flit away her scholarship to Georgetown in Italy. But in a way though, where do you maybe draw the line that he does have to let her go live her own life?
Yeah, it's tough. That one's really tough to answer because, as parents, right, they do the best that they can. I'm not a parent, so I say they do the best. I'm a cat parent, so maybe that counts. But I'll say we do the best that we can, because what's going to happen is his fear is more so about, will he be able to catch her, if she falls, right? Because I think that comes into play too, because parents try to get their kids to a point where they're independent and can, be without them. And so they're going to always recommend the things that they think, right, are the most important things for the child to keep in mind in order to, still protect and take care of themselves and be independent. Because if when they pass, right, how are they going to prepare their kids and be able to be there for them? So they try to surround them, right, with all the things that they think are going to help them on their journey, right?
And what did you think about Amy's mom and her sister and that whole dynamic?
I didn't like that dynamic at all. Oh my gosh. And that's what happened. So, okay. The dynamic was that her sister was very much so the rock of the family, especially in that relationship with her mom. And she was almost kind of being torn between living her own life and being there for her mom all the time. And so that happens a lot with parents sometimes where, one of the children becomes kind of the crutch and the other one goes on to like live what seems like a fun and fulfilling life. So she really felt a lot of, I think, resentment at times towards her sister because of her dynamic with her mom, right? So that was really interesting. I can't remember the sister's name in this. I think it was Denise, right? Is that correct?
I think that sounds right.
Okay. And yeah, so I just saw that her relationship with her mom was very very codependent, very, very much so unhealthy in some ways.
It's interesting that somebody like Herschel or Dad you can kind of see why they would be broken up, to be quite honest, because they are really polar opposites.
Yeah. Well, and see, here's the thing though. I bet that when they were younger, that codependent like attachment style she had would have really been appealing to somebody like Herschel because he is the protector and he's very like much so the caretaker and wants to like take care of someone. So I think maybe when he was younger, that was probably the appeal for why they got together, because he wanted someone that really needed him, right?
That's interesting. How would you see a relationship like that developing?
It develops, it can develop in one of two ways. Like the obvious way being that they divorced, right? Because Herschel realized he also needed a partner, not just someone that he had to take care of. And I think that probably came into play once the kids, started to come into factors. Then you're like, wait a minute, I need a partner, not just a child, right? And so that's one way, which was the divorce, which we saw that happen. But the other way that could have developed if they were going to stay together is her developing her own sense of self and stepping into, more of a role of a partner as opposed to a dependent,
And didn't they explain it in the first episode? I don't remember how many divorces the mom had been through, but she had been through a number.
She's been through a lot of relationships. I think like 4 or something, they said. Yeah.
How do you think somebody like that, how would you approach someone like that?
In what way? What do you mean?
And I guess, how would you maybe explain why it seems like Herschel grew, but maybe she didn't grow? Yeah. I don't know.
She didn't grow because, she was using her relationships to try to hide from herself. Now, I think that what people don't realize is that when you are in a relationship with somebody, especially like intimate ones, like very close knit, like you're living in the same house together, you cannot run from yourself because that other person will see you for who you are and they will call you on your stuff. So when you're somebody that's trying to constantly hide and you don't do the work to develop yourself in or out of a relationship, once you get into one, you're exposed, right? People get to see you more clearly. And so I think she kept trying to hide from herself in these relationships. But again, once you get really close like that, your partner is going to see like all your bad habits. They're going to see all the things you don't like, you run from, you don't want to talk about. It's hard to avoid that stuff when you're in a partnership, right? So yeah, that's what's happening for her.
Steve here. We are a member of the Parthenon Podcast Network, featuring great shows like Richard Lim's This American President and other great shows. Go to parthenonpodcast.com to learn more, and here is a quick word from our sponsors. And so a way that maybe the only thing she could do is run from it, like just actually run.
Yeah. But, seeing her be back a part of the family unit over time throughout the show, one thing that I found interesting was that she really had to start facing some of these issues. So once she started being back a part of like Herschel and I forget his wife's name, the stepmom, Herschel and her, and being a part of like the daughter's lives, being a part of the family unit, that's when you really started to see her develop more. So maybe it's not that she needs to be in a relationship. Maybe she just needs to be in a relationship with her family, all of her family, because that's when you saw a lot of her stuff come out and she had to develop, right?
What's the arc of this series for at least that the first series of Amy? How does she develop throughout the entire series?
It's funny. I feel like Amy was always who she was. I just think how she developed is that she finally realized it. So like, I don't want to give too much away, but there's an illness for her husband and she really has to stand up to like family members, stand up to friends, stand up to her husband even at times when he wasn't, taking the right steps. So I think she always was herself and was always who she was, but she just she found it, over time.
I think it must have been an interesting development that with Lino, it's kind of all fun and games when it's in Italy, but when it develops further, that must have caused some conflict.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, in close quarters in another country, and they hadn't lived together. They had just been doing long distance. So they went from to all this space to, being together 24/7 in a span of a few months. That's a lot. That is a lot.
I mean, just the stress of even, like you said, you have a new person you're involved in, and then all the other things that build up on top of that each other, the practicality of living with each other and moving to a new country, that must have been a huge stress.
Yeah. Well, and then as a man, he was, living there, and for his culture, there's a lot of pride involved, right? So them living in a room in her sister's house, definitely, didn't do that for him as far as his pride was concerned. And so a lot of insecurities exposed on his part in that close living relationship.
What do you hope to maybe see unfold in future seasons of the show?
That's tough because I've seen it all. But I mean, if they brought it back, I know it's a limited series, but let's say they brought it back. I love those kind of what if scenarios.
Yeah.
I would love to see then the transition of their daughter now going off to find her own way and explore her own path, and seeing how Zoe Saldana steps up as a mom, and how she handles that growth of her daughter.
What do you think about it's a little off topic, but what do you think as a binge watcher, the limited run series? I kind of like the fact I can see it both ways. I personally like that when you write something that has a definitive ending.
Mm-hmm. I'm so torn because I get a little emotional when shows end. I like the way that this show ended, and I did cry. I boo-hooed. I sobbed. It was, yeah. So I liked how the show ended, but I don't know. I'm torn because I get excited when when my shows come back. So The Crown came back last night, and I started, watching that again. And it feels like, actually, you know what? There's a show, Jane the Virgin, and I watched it for the first time. That was last year, I think. And I felt like every time I was tuning into Jane the Virgin, that I was tuning into a family. And I was like, okay, I got to help my family today. And I'm watching Jane the Virgin, but I watched it over and over because it just felt like, a connection to the show. So I don't know. I have a hard time with that. I like the limited series because there's some really, really good ones, and you can switch up your watching habits. So one of my longer shows is ended, then the limited series pops up, and you can watch that really quick. Another one was The Echoes. That was really, really good on Netflix, and that was a limited series. So yeah, I get kind of torn. What about you? What do you think about the limited versus the longer series?
That's interesting. I've seen ones I'll probably open myself up for hate mail on this. I thought Stranger Things, that first season was tied it up into such a neat package, and then the second season came along. I thought it was going to be a one and done season. Then they came back with the second one, and it was like, yeah, it's pretty good, but maybe they've stretched the concept a little bit. And then I couldn't even get past the first episode of the third season. It's like the kids are in their 20s now, and it's like, I think it pushed it too far when they could have really made something really tight with one season.
I'll have to go back and check that out. I could never get into Stranger Things for some reason. It didn't grab me enough in the first episode, so I just kind of teetered off. I'll have to go tap in now that you say that was really good.
There's one where I think you might like it. It's called, it was a Netflix original, I think, but it was called The Haunting of Hill House.
Oh, I think I've seen that for some reason. Tell me about it. It was
about a really dysfunctional family. Mm-hmm. And the backdrop was that there was a lot of supernatural stuff that just it would just tangentially, but it was the real core of the show was that it was a family that had enormous structural problems.
Okay. I'm writing it down. I'll have to go check it out.
And I think it was maybe one or maybe 2 seasons, and it just like it was one of those ones where I'm not going to watch this one more episode at midnight, even though I have to get up at 5:30 tomorrow, and then you wind up watching 2 more episodes.
I know that feeling. Yeah. That sounds good. Okay. I wrote it down. I'll check it out. Yeah. I like a lot of crime. I like mystery. I like sci-fi. I like romantic comedies. I think comedy though is like my favorite genre of television and movies. Yeah.
Oh, what are some comedies you're watching?
So I like a lot of the classics. So like I like to go back and watch a lot of Arnez J's comedy. But recent stuff I watched, well, I guess it's not super recent, but like Cold Hearted with Dion Cole. He was one of the coworkers in the show Blackish. He was one of the coworkers to the main character, Dre. And he does stand up and he's like absolutely hilarious. I like DL Hughley's stand-up comedy because he always has a message involved in his comedy, which I really like. Cat Williams obviously is like a favorite for a lot of people. But one that I saw pretty recently was The Elder Millennial. That one was really good. I like that show, that comedy stand-up. That was pretty good.
Getting maybe to talk and wrap up a little bit on From Scratch. What do you think that the show didn't do well?
That is a tough one. I think I would have liked to see her sister's storyline a little bit more developed and see her kind of come into her own more. I mean, she got happy at the end and she had the husband and the baby and all of that, but I just felt like we never really got to see her kind of fulfilled. I would have liked to see that storyline develop a little bit more.
And that's kind of that's the thing that I really do like about series is that it isn't always necessarily focused on one character. That the supporting characters can get a little more play, and it sometimes though that characters who you'd love to see get more developed just don't.
Yeah, because it was like a shallow kind of happiness, if that makes sense, because she got the husband, she had the baby. Like it was kind of shallow. Like we never really got to see internally if she did more work,
I love to talk about people in their podcasts. And I think I'd love to hear more. What's maybe something with your podcast? If you made a pitch with somebody, how would you explain your podcast to them?
Yeah. So the miseducation of well, let me back up. Let's start from scratch here. From scratch. So my favorite quote is understanding is deeper than knowledge. Right. And so one of my goals when it comes to podcasting, when it comes to coaching, is to create understanding in relationships. So that could be understanding with self, that could be understanding with the partner, with the opposite sex. It doesn't have to be somebody you're in close relationship with, but I want to create more understanding. And so the miseducation of masculinity formed through trying to create more understanding for men in the relationship world and in the actual world. So it started off with me kind of, talking to men, kind of like a diary of like, hey, I know you're going through this, and, talking about some of the things that I was seeing. But then it evolved into having actual men on the podcast and asking them questions about their past and how they're most misunderstood in relationships. And that was really fun to do. And I learned a lot about these guys. They were really open. I was just so shocked at how much they were willing to share. And then Single or Divorced developed because I actually went through a divorce. I got married when I was 22 and I got divorced by the time I was like 28 is when everything wrapped up, but started going through separation at 26. And I kept hearing from people, oh, don't worry, you're young, like you'll get over it. It's fine. You didn't have any kids. It was a whole marriage, whole relationship, and people kept minimizing it. And so I created the space of Single or Divorced for folks who, are yes, they're single. Well, yes, they're divorced, but like they're technically single because they don't have kids and they don't have all these, other things. So it's like single, am I single or am I divorced? Right. Mm-hmm. So it was like if you were to receive a note passed in class and it says single or divorced ? Like that would be the podcast. Right. But moving forward, Single or Divorced is being sunset, as well as the miseducation of masculinity. And I am going to start a new podcast called Break Up, Make Up, or Move On. And I am expanding my audience to focus on all types of breakups. So friendships, relationships, divorce, because I feel like we're trending more towards a society of folks that are focused on, being in a relationship versus being married per se. So breakups are going to be more common that are not just divorce. And so I wanted to make sure that that supported folks across the board. So it's going to be all types of breakups, but especially the friendship one, because there is no one really doing a lot of work on friendship coaching through breakups, because those are some of the toughest relationships. And really those set the foundation for romantic relationships. So we need to spend more time when it comes to friendship and learning how to really do that well.
Oh, wow. I have a lot of questions. I get, even just first off, when you're talking to the men in your Miseducation of Masculinity podcast, what were maybe some real eye openers for you?
Yeah, the biggest eye openers is well, I mean, I already knew, but it was just really, it was confirmation and affirming to hear them say this, but that they're trying their best, and sometimes they may say something or they may do something and then it immediately gets misconstrued, and they're having a hard time feeling like a man, right? And figuring out what that means. And so there's so many expectations for them, but they don't feel like they're able to meet them. And there's a lot of pressure on a regular basis. And also just how much men and women communicate so differently. I knew that before, but that one was just really reinforced through those conversations. And I was just, again, surprised at how vulnerable and how open they were willing to be and how much they were willing to share. But I think that's because, again, there's not a lot of safe spaces for men to actually be able to open up and talk and let their guards down a little bit. And so in the podcast, I just focus on a lot of asking questions, because it's their time to shine, it's their time to speak, and it's their time to, be able to open up and be heard, which is definitely lacking. So I felt like that also was achieved through the podcast episodes with the men.
Do you think that in 2022 and nowadays, you might say that it's easier to have relationships, or does the technology and all the ways we can communicate with each other, does it make it more difficult for people to have relationships?
I think it's easier to have relationships, but quality ones, I don't know about that part, because again, we all keep skipping over and people, I guess, don't understand it, but this is why I keep driving home the point of friendship. People keep skipping over friendship before they get into relationship. And in friendship, you get to know everything that you want to know about this person, because they're not putting on a show for you at this point. You're trying to figure each other out and see what kind of friend they are. And that will translate over to what kind of partner they would be too, right? So I just think because we skip over things, or we're looking for, an instant relationship, a microwavable relationship, that we're missing out on some of the keys to having quality relationships.
Oh, wow. That's really interesting. Do you see a difference between, say, the difficulty or the ease of becoming friends and the difference between having a partnership, romantic type situation?
Yeah, because the way that men and women go about friendship is different. So for instance, me on a dating app, Theodora on a dating app, whenever I talk to different guys, I always say hey, I know we met on a dating site and that's great. We matched. I like to take it from a friendship perspective first and get to know you. I know we have a romantic connection because of the fact that we met on a dating app. So that makes sense. But I try to make sure that I clearly state my intentions. So that way we have a chance to get to know each other. The pressure's off. You get to really get to know a person and get to appreciate them for all of who they are, right? And you can decide really quickly. You find out really fast, much faster, whether or not this is somebody you want to spend your time with,
Well, that's interesting. You can be straight about it and to the point. Do you think that in today's day and age that a lot of people are meeting people more digitally than they are in the analog world? Is it becoming more difficult to actually meet people IRL, as the kids say?
IRL in real life. Yeah, I think it is to some degree more difficult, but it also depends on where you are. So that's why I'm also starting a blog to talk about the best states to be single in. Because like, for instance, I'm a pretty friendly, pretty social, always make, some type of connection everywhere I go. But when I went to Colorado, for instance, it was really hard to like connect with people in Colorado Springs. You have to like go there with someone if you want to like have some people or like connect or just talk and enjoy a trip. So I think it depends on what state you live in. There's a lot of differences. I used to live in California. I'm from California. I live in Austin, Texas now, and it's very different here. People are very open, very willing to talk about random things. Like you can say hi to anybody for the most part. In California, people are friendly. But sometimes, the guard can be up a little bit more, just because of the nature of, some of the cities and things that are happening there. So yeah, it just depends on where somebody lives. And if you're a friendly person or not, like if you're an open person, if you're not shy, like I think that all has a lot to do with that. So for people who are a little bit more introverted, they probably are thriving on the online dating scene. But I think a lot of us still want to meet in real life. And I get that that all the time from people like, yeah, I want to meet someone organically in person versus online. So that's really interesting to hear that sentiment. Also, what I have learned about dating apps is that men and women are on dating apps at different times. So a lot of dating apps will actually pay for bots to interact with some of these individuals so that they're getting the attention they need to stay on the app. So they're not always interacting with real people, which is interesting. So I think there's a lot to be said for that too.
Wow, I didn't know that. That's a little dystopian in a way that because what's the app? They want eyeballs on their app. And if people meet each other, that's kind of a side benefit, really.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it's just really interesting to see that kind of piece involved as well. But yeah, just there's a lot to this game. Like, how they talk about social media and the algorithms. I do believe that there are some algorithms to crack in order to date. So yeah, there's quite a few things. I like that, the dating algorithm. I'm going to coin that. You guys heard that here first.
What do you think about what did the pandemic do, and with people being locked up? What did that do to friendships? What did that do to all relationships, really?
Man, it's funny. I used to do financial coaching, and there were a lot of couples in business together, and they would always get the comments of like, how can you work with your spouse? Like I couldn't be with them 24/7. And so you would hear some of those same things come up throughout the pandemic. And it's like, man, how did you marry or get into a live-in situation with someone that you don't even really like, or you can't stand to be around for that much time? That's crazy to me. And also, I think the pandemic exposed a lot of friendships and relationships that weren't built on solid foundations. So I definitely lost quite a few friendships because you realize where you have to kind of be the one to continue to make the effort if you want the friendship or the connection to stay there. So those kinds of things will happen too that I've seen. And in some cases, I saw a lot of people getting more connected with friends and family because they were able to work from home and reprioritize things. Like I had a virtual birthday party one year, and all of my friends and family were on the call. So friends and family that never would have met each other because of where everybody lives got to all meet and celebrate together. So that was pretty cool. So in some cases, I think some people got more connected, but in most cases, we saw a lot of when you add money problems on top of it from people being unemployed for long amounts of time, like there's just so many things that could make the foundation shaky that, maybe they never encountered before in their relationship.
What do you think going forward with more and more people working from home? How is that going to affect them?
Yeah, people have to create boundaries for work from home. So as you can see, I'm in my office. And so I try, sometimes I'm a couch worker, but I try to work from my office and I try to create boundaries. So when I close that door, I've closed that door for the day, And the reason why I say that boundaries are going to be really important with work from home, that's how you're going to keep your relationship good if you keep prioritizing your relationship over, your work. Work has its place, but your relationship should really be a priority. So when you have time to take time off, take time off. When you're working, work. When you're not working, don't work, right? Like really have those boundaries set up.
Steve here again with a quick word from our sponsors. I didn't really work in virtually at all during any of this, so it's nice to have a window into it. Did a lot of companies, and did you hear a lot of things? Did people have the expectation that they were to work all the time, even if it wasn't explicit that you have to work all the time? Well, your office is in your house, and you have your phone, and you have your computer. Did people feel that they were expected to be glued to their work email 24/7?
I think so to some degree at first before people got used to it, because, like so in tech, my industry is tech, right? So a lot of people had work from home days initially before, but you felt like you needed to be more productive and let people see that you're getting a lot done because you're not physically there in the office. And to be honest, being physically somewhere doesn't mean you're more productive or not. But I think that unspoken feeling was there for a lot of people. But now that people have mastered it, I think that working from home has actually become a really big added benefit because you can really structure your time. Like you can sleep more because you're not spending so much time commuting. You can, have more time with your family because as soon as you finish work, like you're right there, in your house next door to your family. I think that's really cool. That has become an added benefit. But before, people were expected to work. Some companies were giving people wellness days, right? Because they weren't taking off enough time from work. So those kinds of things were happening too. Yeah.
What did you see do you think that there's a component missing of not being able to hang out at the water cooler or not lunching with people in the office? Is there something missing there, or opportunities even for relationships and for friendships?
I don't feel like that. Me personally, I like to be to myself. And I used to have a lot of people stop by my desk and talk to me. So that was a part of like my culture at work. But as a Black woman, I have realized work from home has probably been really good for a lot of underrepresented minorities because actually, I'll tell a story. I used to work at a company, I won't say the name. And at one point, the manager called me into her office and she said, we really want to keep you on. We think you're great and you're doing great work, but you don't seem invested in the work. And mind you, this program that I created was excellent. It had a lot of components. It was the first of its kind. So it was pretty big deal. Like things were going great. But because I wasn't always like at my desk, always overly smiling or overly like, chatting or talking to people, I think sometimes similarity biases come up when people don't see or identify the same traits in you, and they can tend to lean towards other people or like, give more opportunities in another direction. So honestly, working from home has been a joy for me because I don't have to put on all of those masks or feel like someone is, out to get me. And I'm not saying that all companies are like that or all people are like that. That was really one instance that happened, but it just relieves a lot of that pressure of having to like have this added layer of a mask that you carry around with you every day. So yeah, it's been great for me. But I do like purposefully set up coffee chats and set up time to reconnect with people that have helped me or on my team or in other departments. So I really drive that time to make sure I'm connecting with people. And I think it makes it more equitable for folks that aren't in the same location if they're on a bigger team, because again, similarity bias is a big thing. Like, oh, we're both in this city, so let's hang out more. And this other teammate kind of gets left out of that, equation. So I think that it does create some equity in that way for folks, and it creates opportunities to have more relationships across the board if you actually do something with that.
Oh, that's really interesting. I wonder though, maybe it shows I'm a little pessimistic. It seems like sometimes when some biases get flattened out, that something else pops up somewhere else. Do you see, even if maybe there isn't any biases now, that there might be a potential for things to not work out in this new culture? Because, and also it doesn't seem like it's going to go away, that this seems pretty much this is how things are going to go.
I hope so, personally. But no, I mean, I do. So there's other biases then that come up when it comes to like the workload, because somebody like me, like I said, I my first 3 hours of the day, I get pretty much most of my things done, right? So I'm pretty like high functioning, right? And so the bias of like what I look like has been taken away, but the bias of now the work speaks for itself. And so more work will come, right? And so those kind of things do creep in. But again, like I talked about boundaries, that is the name of the game for the new virtual world that we're in, is boundaries, boundaries, boundaries. So if I don't feel like I can do something, I push back 100%. Like I have no problem speaking up. Like if you want me to keep performing and excelling in this manner, and you want me to keep producing great results, I can't take this on in addition to what I already have. Like yeah, you have to have boundaries, and managing up, managing sideways. I don't know if that's a term, but managing up and managing your peers, like you have to be able to do a lot of that to make sure that your boundaries are not encroached on. I don't answer stuff if I'm all like, you just have to have those boundaries. So, yeah.
Do you feel like you've moved beyond the 40 hours a week, Monday through Friday, 8 to 4? Do you think, and do you think that managers and people are respecting that if I want to get up at 6:30 and get everything done, as long as you're productive? Or do you think people are still have that mindset that you have to be available from 8 to 5 o'clock and punch out and be there for 40 hours a week?
Honestly, I can't say for other industries, but for tech, I feel like it's always kind of been like, get your work done, just be like productive. I think to some degree you should be available throughout the whole day. So like I always have my chat open, like it should be available if people need to reach me, even if I don't have anything specific I'm working on at that moment. But I feel like in tech, people are a little bit more flexible and results driven versus like time driven. But other industries, I don't know. I would probably argue that they're not as flexible as tech, because I was in customer service for a while before moving into tech, and I feel like, just thinking back to the company I used to work for, it probably would have been very difficult to be in a work from home position with them. Just because of like we want to see that you're working all the time.
I guess in a lot of ways, tech probably was able to transition into this a lot more smoothly because a lot of those pieces were more in place over a decade ago in a lot of ways.
Yeah, well, it depends on what department too, because like learning and development, which kind of is a natural correlation to coaching, right? And so learning and development, we did a lot of things in person, when it came to sessions and trainings and things like that. So there was like a mad dash to get everything converted to virtual. And it was kind of painful at first to come up with like a system and to like really figure out how to migrate all of those things over to virtual, especially the things that were happening within the first couple of months of the shutdown. So yeah, depending on the department, it was pretty difficult at first for us.
Describe your coaching style. I'd love to hear more about that and the whole idea of coaching.
Yeah, coaching within itself is all about asking questions, because we all know the answers. We all have the answers. I know people hate hearing that, but we know the answers. We have the answers. They're in us. We know how we should be treated. We know how we feel when we're not being treated the way we want to be treated. Like we know these things about ourselves. It's just that sometimes, it's helpful to have a coach to help ask you the proper questions to get you to a place of realizing you have the answer and what the answer actually is, right? So I'm all about asking questions, I would say my coaching style is investigative, if you will. But it's a conversation, obviously, but I'm trying to get to the bottom of, what you already know, right?
Do you feel like it's kind of trying to get people past the wall of not wanting to hear the right question and now wanting to know that they know the right answer?
Yeah, because I deal with people who are going through breakups. And okay, so fun fact. I'm really quick on my feet, like when it comes to just saying things. And so I've learned to like turn my inner pettiness down so that I don't just say whatever. But when I was in the breakup phase, like myself, I was petty. I was upset. I was angry. I was saying whatever, doing whatever. I just wasn't a good spot. And so a lot of people that I deal with, are going through that breakup phase and they just need a little room to be petty. And so sometimes it's hard to get them out of the petty lane and into, and it's okay. Like you should be in the petty lane for some amount of time, but it's hard to get them out of the petty lane and kind of get them, back to focusing on themselves, what makes them unique and why they're going to find love again. It's not over just because this one person ended this thing or you ended it, like whatever the case is. But yeah, it's hard because people are stubborn. We want to feel like how we want to feel and we want to feel validated in our feelings. So sometimes my sessions are just get it off your chest, right? And let's just vent. Tell me the tea, what's going on? Why are you mad? Like what happened? And I feel like once somebody can have that equity or that trust built with you, then it's easier to start getting through some of those more difficult things, those difficult conversations. So it always kind of starts with like a vent sesh and then we get into some of the real work.
It's awesome. I've learned so much. If people want to learn more about you, your podcast, and what you have to offer, where can they find that?
Yeah, they can find me on, I'm going through like a total rebranding, y'all. So you can check out my website, but don't judge me right now because we're not, we're not where we need to be yet, but I'm working with a brand team and a marketer at the moment. So it's yourbreakupbestie.com. And that's where people can find me. I am your breakup bestie on Instagram. So it's your_breakup_bestie on Instagram. Same thing on TikTok. Same thing on LinkedIn. The page is Your Breakup Bestie. We will get a Facebook page at some point. But yeah, so yourbreakupbestie.com is where you can find me and where you can stay updated. Do not judge my website. We're getting there. But yeah, that's where they can find me.
Awesome. Thank you so much. It has been a great pleasure to have you on.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. I've enjoyed myself.